there's something unsettling about narcissists. No matter how much they try to show the world they've moved on, the truth is very different. They never get over you. Even when everything seems to suggest otherwise, when they appear happy in new relationships, smiling on social media, acting indifferent, on the inside, the story is completely different. But why? What stops them from truly leaving you behind? Here's something most people don't realize. The problem was never you. It was never about love, connection, or even the relationship itself. The problem is the way narcissists see people. To them, no one is an individual with their own emotions and desires. Everyone is just an extension of their ego. You were never just you to a narcissist. You were a reflection, a source of emotional supply, a mirror. Now think about this. What happens when someone loses a mirror? No matter how many new ones they find, the reflection is never exactly the same. That uncomfortable feeling starts creeping in, a nagging sense that something is missing. And that's when the obsession begins. Even if they jump into a new relationship immediately, don't be fooled. That doesn't mean they've moved on. Narcissists don't process breakups like other people. Instead of feeling, healing, and growing, they replace. Like an addict chasing the next fix to avoid facing their own emptiness. But what happens when that new source doesn't fill the void? Guess where their thoughts start drifting back to? That's right. Back to you. But here's something even more disturbing. Narcissists hate losing. To them, a relationship doesn't end. It's just paused. Deep down, they believe they will always have an open door. And that's why so many of them come back, months or even years later, as if nothing ever happened. They test the waters, drop breadcrumbs, create excuses to reappear, because in their mind, and you're still there, waiting. Now, imagine the shock when they realize that you've changed, that you are no longer accessible, that the door they swore would stay open has been locked and sealed forever. What happens when a narcissist loses access to someone they believed they controlled? Rage, frustration, a crushing sense of defeat. But here's the most interesting part. If they never truly valued you, why does losing you hurt so much? Because deep down, it was never about you. It was about the power they thought they had over you. And if there's one thing a narcissist can't stand, it's losing control. That's why they'll spend months, years, maybe even a lifetime trying to regain some influence over you, even if it's just to test whether they can still affect you. Whether through subtle messages, spreading rumors, or flaunting a fake display of happiness, they'll do whatever it takes to provoke a reaction. Now, the big question. Knowing all of this, how do you make sure that even though a narcissist will never get over you, they will also never again have any impact on your life? If you've ever wondered why a narcissist just can't seem to move on from you, even when they act like they have, the answer lies in their inability to form genuine emotional connections. Unlike emotionally healthy people who experience love, loss, and healing in a natural cycle, narcissists operate on a completely different wavelength. For them, relationships aren't about mutual growth or deep connection. They're about control, validation, and feeding their fragile ego. When you were in their life, you played a very specific role. You weren't just a partner, friend, or companion. You were a source of narcissistic supply. And what does that mean? It means that your reactions, your admiration, even your pain all served a purpose, to make them feel important. The moment that supply is cut off, they don't just miss you in the way a normal person would. Instead, they feel a deep sense of emptiness, not because of love, but because they lost something that was fueling their sense of self. That's why even if they move on to someone else, that new person isn't better or more special. They're just another source of supply, a replacement. But replacements never quite feel the same. No two people react in identical ways, and that's frustrating for a narcissist. They might find someone new, but if that person doesn't mirror them in the way you did, doesn't admire them the way you did, or doesn't respond to their manipulation in the same way, they start to realize something. Losing you meant losing a dynamic they depended on. And here's where things get even more interesting. Narcissists don't just remember people for who they were, They remember them for how they made them feel. If you once made them feel powerful, admired, or in control, that memory sticks with them. Even if they discarded you or made it seem like you weren't important, the truth is they never truly let go. They might pretend, they might post about how happy they are, they might even go out of their way to make you think they've moved on effortlessly. But deep down, the loss of a source of supply is something they never fully recover from. And the more you detach, the more you ignore them, the worse it gets for them. Narcissists thrive on reaction, whether it's love, anger, sadness, or even hatred. The moment you stop reacting, you take away their power. And that's why they never really move on. Not because they still love you, but because they never got closure in the way they needed, with you still under their influence. So what happens when a narcissist realizes they can't reach you anymore? What happens when they understand that you're truly gone, that their power over you has completely vanished? That's what we're going to break down next. When a narcissist realizes they can no longer reach you, something shifts inside them. It's not a normal kind of heartbreak or longing. It's frustration, rage, and an almost obsessive need to regain control. See, narcissists don't experience closure in the way emotionally healthy people do. They don't process loss, reflect, grow, or heal. Instead, they view separation as a power struggle. And if they're not the ones in control of how it ends, they feel like they've lost. And narcissists hate losing. This is why so many of them return, even after months or years. It's not because they've suddenly realized your worth, or because they've grown as a person. It's because the idea of you living your life without them, without thinking about them, without needing them, without missing them, is unbearable to their ego. They don't want you back because they love you. They want you back because they need to know they can still affect you. And if they can't reach you directly, that's when the mind games begin. Suddenly, you might notice them popping up in places they know you'll be. Maybe they start following people you know, interacting with mutual friends, or even posting things that seem oddly targeted at you. If they're really desperate, they might even spread rumors, trying to control how people see them and how people see you. The goal? To get inside your head. Because if they can't have you in their life, they'll settle for living rent-free in your mind. But here's where they underestimate you. They assume that because their tactics worked before, they'll work again. They think you'll fall for the same charm, the same guilt-tripping, the same emotional hooks. What they don't realize is that once you see through their manipulation, it stops being effective. Once you recognize the cycle, you break free from it. And that's what truly scares them. It's not just that you've moved on. It's that you've moved on without them. It's that you've realized your worth, that you've built a life where they have no influence, no control, no importance. Narcissists live for validation, for attention, for proof that they still matter. So when they're met with silence, indifference, and the cold realization that they no longer have a hold over you, it shakes them to their core. But the real question is, what do you do when they try to come back? How do you handle the inevitable moment when they reach out, when they test the waters, when they try to pull you back into their web? That's exactly what we're going to explore next. Romantic manipulation is extremely draining, and dealing with a narcissist is never easy. So what happens when the narcissist tries to come back? Because make no mistake, they will. Whether it's through a direct message, a random encounter, or some calculated move to remind you they still exist, they always return in some way. But this time, you're not the same person they left behind. At first, their approach might seem harmless, even casual. A simple, "Hey, how have you been?" or a nostalgic reference to something you once shared. But make no mistake, this isn't genuine curiosity. It's a test. They're probing, trying to see if there's still an opening, a way to slide back into your life. And the worst thing you can do? Engage. Because the moment you respond, even if it's just to reject them, you're giving them exactly what they want. Proof that they still have an effect on you. But what if they come back with grand gestures, apologies, promises of change, declarations of how much they miss you? This is where most people get caught in the trap. Narcissists are masterful at mimicking self-awareness when it serves their interests. They'll say everything you ever wanted to hear. They'll act like they've had a life-changing realization. They'll claim they've finally seen the light. But it's all a performance. Because real change requires deep introspection, accountability, and genuine effort, things a narcissist is incapable of. And then there's the guilt card. If charm doesn't work, they'll try to make you feel responsible for their pain. Suddenly they're the victim. Maybe they'll bring up how much they've struggled since you left, how no one understands them like you do, how they just want closure, and this is where your boundaries are tested. Because deep down, you might feel a pull, a sense of responsibility. But here's the truth. You are not responsible for fixing them. You are not responsible for easing their suffering. And you are definitely not responsible for giving them closure. So what's the best response when they try to come back? Silence, indifference, absolute detachment. Not anger, not explanations, not one last conversation. Because any reaction, even a negative one, feeds their ego. It tells them they still matter to you. And that's the one thing they cannot stand to lose. But let's go deeper. Why does cutting off all contact work so effectively against a narcissist? What happens in their mind when they realize they have no power over you anymore? That's what we're going to uncover next. When a narcissist realizes they've completely lost their grip on you, something inside them starts to unravel. It's not sadness. It's not regret. It's a mixture of wounded pride, rage, and an unbearable sense of irrelevance. And for someone who has spent their entire life feeding off control and validation, that feeling is pure agony. At first, they might pretend it doesn't bother them. Maybe they'll act unbothered, posting about how happy they are, flaunting a new relationship or making it seem like they've leveled up without you. But this isn't moving on, it's overcompensation. They're desperate to create an illusion, to convince not just you, but themselves, that they're unaffected. But deep down there's a storm brewing. Because nothing eats away at a narcissist more than the realization that they no longer exist in your world, and this is where their behavior becomes unpredictable. Some narcissists will keep trying, subtly at first, then more aggressively. They might reach out randomly, trying to spark a reaction. They might use mutual friends to deliver messages or create drama just to pull you back into their orbit. And if none of that works, that's when the real meltdown begins. You see, narcissists don't just need admiration, they need to know they matter. When they finally understand that you've detached completely, that they can't manipulate your emotions, that you genuinely don't care anymore, their entire sense of self takes a hit. Because in their mind, if they don't have power over you, what does that say about them? It forces them to confront a terrifying truth. They are not as important as they believe themselves to be. And nothing terrifies a narcissist more than insignificance. This is why no contact is the ultimate weapon against them. Not because it's punishing them, but because it strips away the very thing they thrive on: attention. A narcissist without an audience is like an actor without a stage. And when they realize that no amount of manipulation, guilt-tripping, or grand gestures will bring you back, they have no choice but to look elsewhere for supply. But what happens after that? Do they ever truly forget about you? Do they ever stop thinking about you, or will they always have you in the back of their mind? That's exactly what we're going to uncover next. The narcissist wants to control everyone. So do narcissists ever truly forget about you? Do they ever move on completely, erasing you from their mind as if you never existed? The short answer? No. Not in the way you might think. Unlike emotionally healthy people who process relationships, learn from them, and eventually find closure, narcissists operate in a completely different way. To them, people are not meaningful connections, they're resources. And when a narcissist loses a resource, they don't just forget about it. They remember it, they categorize it, and they keep it stored in the back of their mind, just in case they ever need it again. That's why so many narcissists resurface after long periods of silence. Months, years, even decades later, they might suddenly pop up out of nowhere. It's not because they've been thinking about you in the way a normal person reminisces about the past. It's because they've hit a low point. Their current sources of validation aren't giving them what they need, and they're scanning their past for people they once had control over. And here's where it gets even darker. If they remember you as someone who was deeply affected by them, someone who fought for them, someone who struggled to let go, that memory becomes useful to them. It means you were once a reliable source of supply. And in their mind, if you were once available, maybe you could be available again. That's why they try to re-enter your life under the most random circumstances. An innocent, "How have you been?" message, a like on an old photo, an unexpected apology. It's never random. It's a calculated move to test if you're still accessible. But what happens if they remember you differently? If they remember you as the one who got away, the one who slipped through their fingers, the one they couldn't control? That's when you become something even more powerful, an obsession. Not in a romantic sense, but in an ego-driven, bruised pride kind of way. A narcissist hates knowing that someone was able to escape their grip completely. It forces them to confront their biggest fear, that they aren't as powerful as they believe themselves to be. And that's why, even when it seems like they've disappeared, even when it looks like they've moved on, the truth is, you still exist somewhere in their mind. Maybe as a lost source of supply, maybe as a missed opportunity, maybe as a reminder of their failure. But no matter what, they don't forget. They never truly let go. But here's the good news. You don't have to care. Because while they might still think about you, it doesn't mean you have to give them space in your life, in your heart, or even in your thoughts. The real victory isn't when they remember you. It's when you realize that their memory means absolutely nothing to you. But let's take it one step further. What happens when you are the one who no longer feels anything? How do you reach the point where their existence is nothing more than a distant, irrelevant memory? That's what we'll explore next. So how do you reach the point where a narcissist becomes nothing more than a distant, irrelevant memory? How do you truly free yourself from the emotional weight of their existence? Because that's the real goal, isn't it? Not just escaping their grip physically, but mentally and emotionally, erasing them from your world. The first step is understanding the difference between moving on and breaking free. Moving on means you acknowledge what happened, accept it, and continue living your life. But breaking free? That's something much deeper. It's when you stop relating to the version of yourself that once cared about them. It's when their name no longer stirs emotion, no anger, no sadness, no resentment, just indifference. And here's the key to getting there. Detachment is a decision, not a feeling. You don't wait until you feel ready to let go. You decide to. You choose to remove their presence from your mental space, the same way you would clear out old clutter from your home. You stop feeding their presence in your mind by refusing to engage in thoughts about them. No more replaying the past. No more analyzing what went wrong. No more wondering if they'll ever change. Because none of that matters. What matters is you. But let's be real. Letting go is easier said than done. The mind clings to what's familiar, even if it was toxic. This is why the next step is replacing, not just removing. You don't just cut them out and leave a void. You fill that space with things that actually serve you. New experiences, new hobbies, new relationships that bring real connection. Because the more you build a life that is full and meaningful, the less space there is for anything related to them. And here's where the true shift happens. One day, without even realizing it, you'll hear their name or someone will mention them, and instead of feeling a rush of emotion, you'll feel nothing. Not relief, not victory, just nothing. Like hearing about an old coworker from a job you barely remember. They simply don't matter anymore. And this is what narcissists can never understand. They believe they will always hold power over the people they once manipulated. They assume that even if you leave, you'll always think about them. But when you reach the point where they are no longer a factor in your life, when you've stripped them of any influence over your emotions, that's the one thing they can never take back. So now, the final question. What does life look like after breaking free? What changes when you truly step into a version of yourself that no longer carries the weight of their existence? That's exactly what we'll explore next. So what does life look like after breaking free? What happens when you truly step into a version of yourself that no longer carries the weight of their existence? The answer is simple, yet profound. You rediscover yourself in ways you never thought possible. For so long, your mind was tangled in their manipulations, their lies, their cycles of affection and cruelty. Whether you realized it or not, you adapted to their presence. You anticipated their reactions, you adjusted your behavior to avoid conflict. You spent energy trying to understand them. But now, that energy belongs to you again. And when you reclaim it, everything changes. Suddenly your thoughts are lighter. Your emotions feel real again, not like a roller coaster of highs and lows dictated by someone else's games. You wake up without that lingering sense of dread, without wondering what version of them you'll have to deal with today. And most importantly, you begin to feel at home, in your own skin again. But the biggest transformation isn't just internal. It's in the way you interact with the world. You start recognizing red flags you once ignored. You stop tolerating the things you used to justify. You become someone who values their peace over temporary companionship, someone who doesn't entertain toxicity just because it's familiar. In short, you become untouchable to people like them. And here's where the real power lies. The narcissist may still think about you. They may still try to test the waters to see if they can sneak back into your life. But when they do, they'll find a version of you they no longer recognize. Someone who doesn't flinch at their presence. Someone who doesn't react. Someone who has outgrown them in every possible way. And that's the part they'll never understand. They thought they broke you, but all they did was free you. They thought you'd always look back, but you're too busy looking forward. They thought they'd haunt you forever, but in the end they were nothing more than a lesson. One you've learned so well that you'll never have to repeat it again. So where do you go from here? What's the next step in a life that is truly yours? Free from their influence, their control, their presence. That's exactly what we'll explore next. Now that you've broken free, now that the narcissist no longer has a hold on you, the real question is, what comes next? Because freedom isn't just about removing them from your life. It's about building something stronger in their absence. It's about creating a life so fulfilling, so deeply rooted in your own worth, that people like them can never touch you again. The first step? Rebuilding your identity. Because whether you realize it or not, being entangled with a narcissist changes you. You adapt, you shrink parts of yourself, you mold your personality to survive their chaos. Now, it's time to undo all of that. To ask yourself, who am I when I'm not walking on eggshells? What do I love when no one is manipulating me? What do I want now that my choices are truly my own? And then comes the most powerful shift of all, trusting yourself again. One of the most damaging things narcissists do is make you doubt your own instincts. They gaslight you into questioning reality. They make you believe that you're the problem, that you're too sensitive, too emotional, too much. But now, you reclaim your voice. You learn to listen to that inner warning again, the one that whispers, "This isn't right. I deserve better." And this time, you listen. Then, there's setting new standards. Not just in relationships, but in everything. In how you allow people to treat you, in how you show up for yourself, in how you refuse to accept anything less than the peace you fought so hard to gain. Because when you've survived a narcissist, you don't settle anymore. You don't entertain toxicity just because it's familiar. You don't mistake intensity for love, chaos for passion, or manipulation for care. You recognize real, healthy connection, and you refuse to accept anything less. And here's where everything comes full circle. The narcissist thought they broke you, but in reality they did something they never intended to do. They forced you to evolve. They forced you to wake up. They forced you to confront your wounds, to heal. to become so unshakably solid in who you are that no one like them can ever touch you again. And one day, without even realizing it, you'll have a moment where you feel completely at peace, where you look back, not with anger, not with sadness, but with indifference. And that's when you'll know, you didn't just escape them, you outgrew them. You became someone they could never break again. So now, the final question. How do you carry this strength forward? How do you ensure that no one, not just the narcissist, but anyone, ever has that kind of control over you again? That's what we'll dive into next. Now that you've reclaimed your power, how do you make sure no one, not just the narcissist, but anyone, ever has that kind of control over you again? Because breaking free isn't just about escaping one toxic person. It's about ensuring that you never fall into the same patterns again. It's about protecting your energy, your peace, and your sense of self. The first and most important step? Understanding your own worth. Not in a vague, cliché way, but in a deep, unshakable way. Because when you truly know your worth, manipulation doesn't work on you anymore. Love bombing doesn't sweep you off your feet. Guilt tripping doesn't make you second-guess yourself. You stop looking for validation from others because you validate yourself. And that brings us to boundaries. Real boundaries. Not just the kind you set in words, but the kind you enforce with actions. Boundaries that say, I don't entertain people who make me question my reality. I don't justify my worth to anyone. I don't give second chances to people who disrespect me the first time. Because here's the truth. People will always test your boundaries. The difference now? You don't bend them. You don't explain them. You don't apologize for them. And that alone repels the kind of people who once thrived on your insecurity. Then there's the power of detachment. Not in a cold or unemotional way, but in a way that says, I don't attach my peace to anyone else's behavior. You don't get caught up in someone else's drama. You don't absorb their moods, their projections, their attempts to manipulate. You observe, you assess, and if it doesn't align with your peace, you walk away. No guilt, no hesitation. And let's not forget the final and most powerful shift of all. You stop fearing loss. Narcissists and toxic people thrive on the fear of abandonment. They manipulate through the idea that you need them, that losing them would be a tragedy. But now, you fear nothing. Because you know that anyone who disrespects you, manipulates you, or drains your energy is not a loss. They're a blessing to be rid of. This is where everything changes. Because the moment you stop fearing the end of relationships, the moment you realize you are enough on your own, you become untouchable. People can try their games, their tactics, their manipulations, but none of it works. And that is what true freedom looks like. So what's next? What does life look like when you've not only escaped, not only healed, but thrived beyond the reach of toxicity? That's what we're going to explore next. So what does life look like when you've not only escaped, not only healed, but thrived beyond the reach of toxicity? It looks like peace. Real, unshakable peace. The kind that isn't dependent on another person's behavior, moods, or approval. The kind of peace that comes from knowing you are in complete control of your own life. It looks like confidence. The quiet kind. The kind that doesn't need to prove itself to anyone. The kind that walks away without explaining. The kind that no longer seeks validation from people who once made you doubt yourself. It looks like freedom. Not just freedom from the narcissist, but freedom from your past, from your old patterns, from the version of yourself that once tolerated things you would never accept now. You are no longer surviving. You are living. And the most beautiful part? The narcissist no longer matters. Not their thoughts, not their opinions, not whether they still think about you or not. Because while they are stuck in their endless cycle of manipulation and emptiness, you are free. You have moved on in ways they never will. This is the ultimate victory. Not revenge, not proving a point, not making them regret losing you. The real victory is your happiness. The fact that they are no longer a factor in your life, your mind, or your heart. You won. Not by fighting, not by engaging, but by becoming someone they can never reach again. And that is what true healing looks like.